Why hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Sit Down. Today, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Mr. James Munro. James is somebody I was put in contact with off the back of my conversation with Mr. Josh Fernie, whom, as you will know, if you've gone and watched the conversation that we had, brought up, or rather I brought up, and broached the topic of sensible versus crackpot nationalism. And Josh himself mentioned that he may not be the best person to talk to with regards to this issue. You know, he'd not been involved personally in any real capacity with these actual crackpot nationalist organizations. But he mentioned somebody who did. And that's been in contact with James because James has had experience running in these kinds of circles in his youth. James forewent going to university or college along with a lot of his peers due to this idea that there was a massive conflict coming in Scotland in the very, very near future, and they needed to be prepared for that. It's a very, very hopeless and terrified mindset at the time that James and a lot of young people shared. We talk about that. We talk about how he become radicalized into these very, again, what you could describe as far-right militant kind of circles, very similar to what you would see with Antifa and other things on the other side of the political aisle. You know, the kind of activities that he got involved in, the path that it led him down, the damage that it did, and also the damage that it can potentially still do to a lot of young people who could very easily fall into the same path. This marks up the bulk of our conversation. I was talking about de-radicalizing people away from those sort of very fringe, very margin, for lack of a better term, marginalized right communities that want to do a lot of damage, right? And that could do a lot of damage. We talk about the difference between what Homeland does and those kinds of organizations, for example. We also talk a little bit about the actual damage that not only can be done, but has been done to young people by people in these kinds of circles that seek to take advantage of them. There's been allegations, for example, that Kenny Smith himself has been grooming young people. Organizations like Hope Not Hate and people like that are very eager to throw their allegations at Kenny Smith of grooming young teenagers and all stuff like that. And we talk about why not only that's not true, but we also highlight young people falling into a really bad path that these ideologies can lead them down. It's going to do untold damage. And I hope this serves you, the young people, as a bit of an insight into what it really would be like to go down these paths, so that maybe you can choose a better one. Because it's you guys, the young people that started with us. It's you guys, the young people that were the prime targets of this Maoist cultural revolutions going on in the UK right now, trying to turn you against your parents, trying to dissolve the family, trying to dissolve all of our societies, trying to replace us as a people. It's you guys that were the targets. It's you guys that were the targets to become Mao's Red Guard. We hope that this gives you a little bit of an insight into really what it would be like, to what awaits you if you fall into the programming on one side, to what awaits you if you fall into the programming on the other side. And maybe show you that there is, and this goes out to all of you, that there is actually a political solution. And you better hope that there is a political solution. Because if we don't have a political solution, what does that tell us? All that and more in my sit down with Mr. James Munro. Enjoy. Hey there, guys. How is it going? Welcome back to the Voice of the Valleys podcast with your host, Mr. George Cresswell. Got a great conversation for you today. Despite many technological troubles and tribulations that we've been going through to try and make this happen this morning. But if you are listening to this after Wednesday, the 16th of April, which is today at 6 p.m., my interview or conversation with Mr. Josh Fernie, the Homeland Party, has just dropped. And one of the topics that came up in that conversation, which led to this conversation right now, was the distinction between sensible nationalism and crackpot nationalism. And Josh said at the time he wasn't really one to talk to in terms of having gone down this route himself from a personal perspective, but he put me in contact with somebody who did, and that is my guest today, Mr. James Munro, and we're going to talk a little bit about that and just see where the conversation goes. I feel this is going to be very, very important because this is a topic of conversation I don't see a lot of people talking about, that the idea that there is a difference with Homeland, they've been called Hope Not Hate stands, they've been called far-right ethno-nationalist Nazis, or all of these horrible different labels that have been used. But it sort of throws a spanner in the works if you have the idea that the chairman, Kenny Smith, has maybe talked some people out of going down that national socialism path that many people, I don't want to say myself included, but young men especially, very prone to radicalization and very prone to not knowing where to channel that energy at the systematic destruction of their country. I've rambled on way too long. I'm going to hand you over to James now so he can tell you a little bit about himself. James, thank you very much.
Hi there. I wanted to say thank you very much for having me on. I've been very excited to do this interview, and I'm looking forward to watching your interview with Josh Fernie as well. This topic that you brought up about the de-radicalization of vulnerable young men is a topic very close to my heart. I found myself going down that path, and I was only really pulled out by the consistent efforts of Kenny Smith, and then later with my joining of the Homeland Party. So just want to say I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very happy to answer your questions because I think this is an important topic.
So when it is a very, very important topic, especially with all of the labels and all the different terms that get thrown about nowadays, spawned a whole bunch of memes, especially with regards to the left wing in particular. Everybody I don't like is a Nazi or a racist, or everybody who disagrees with me is a racist Nazi, whatever it is. But talking about de-radicalization, when you sort of first encountered Kenny Smith, what was your sort of mindset like at that time? Where was you sort of in your headspace kind of thing?
Yeah. So I first met Kenny Smith about 4 years ago now. I met him on a hike, actually. And we got to talking briefly. I think that he clocked quite early on that I was vulnerable to these dangerous ideas. And back then, after we got to know each other, we engaged in some activism together. He would quite often, I would find myself a couple of times a week being on 4 hour long phone calls with Kenny, which now he's very, very busy. That was an incredibly, I'm incredibly grateful for him to give me his time because of how precious it is. And we found ourselves talking about these things. And at first, like a lot of young men, I was very arrogant. I thought I had the world set to rights in my mind, that I knew all the solutions, I knew how it was going to carry out. And Kenny really sort of blasted holes with his rhetorical shotgun into that and showed me that it was hopeless the way I was trying to approach the problem, and dangerous. So before I'd met Kenny Smith, I was running in a previous outfit, in a different outfit, and it's that all came out in my docs. I got doxed by, I think I've been doxed about 4 times now, actually, by different organisations. But for me, it started off. I was a teenager, and I was looking around at the world and the way it was, and the way my country was being run, and I saw an existential threat to the continued existence of my people and my culture. And I was terrified. absolutely terrified. I still am scared and worried for my people, and I do want the best for us. I want us in 1,000 years. I want my people to still exist, and I want us to still be able to prosper in our homeland.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was that teenager, and I was terribly scared and afraid, and it seemed like every institution had let me down, and that almost there was a deliberate policy that was anti-Scottish, even because I identify more with being Scottish than I do British. I believe Scotland's my nation. I am still British. I'm not going to be advocating for any sort of breakaway Scottish state on this podcast at all.
You heard it here first, folks. You heard it here first.
Yeah, I'm not going to be advocating for Scottish independence on this podcast. Certainly not. But as that young man with those scares and those worries, I started looking up online, and part of the problem that leads young men down dangerous roads is that the sensible alternatives, at least back then, now we have the Homeland Party, but at least back then, they were being shut down, silenced. Voices were being kicked off of YouTube, Facebook. Twitter back then was not like it is now. Any sort of sensible approach, any sort of sensible solutions to these problems, sensible people pushing for sensible solutions were being knocked off. So those ideas weren't getting put out into the space, into the conversation. Mm-hmm. And the only ones that were allowed to remain were ones that were extreme enough that they'd already cordoned themselves off to some parts of the internet, like 4chan, like Discord, Telegram, all these secret squirrel little areas of the internet where bad ideas can prosper. So because there were no sensible solutions being offered, or they weren't put in front of me, I found myself falling down the rabbit hole, and I got in touch with a group of lads, young lads like me. We're all teenagers, and we thought, we really did believe that there was some sort of race war coming, and that we had to prepare for that, and that it was going to happen this year or next year. And now, 10 years on, or well, not quite 10, 7 years on from that, that's not happened, and it's not going to happen, or at least it's not going to happen anytime soon. And one of the most dangerous ideas that was being bandied about at the time, and you'll have heard this before, everybody has, is the phrase, "There is no political solution." And I think that's the most dangerous idea that there is, because rhetorically, what does that leave as a solution? Well, what does that leave? You say, if there's no political solution, if this can't be resolved properly through the institutions, through public will, how's it going to be resolved? And the only option that's left is violence and crime. And when those ideas are pushed onto young men, especially ones without much good leadership in their lives, they'll embrace those ideas because they feel like there has to be some way to push back against this. And the only tools available to them is that. So what happened with us is we ended up marching around, went to a few protests, marched around in Doc Martens, skull masks, waving flags, certain hand gestures, shouting and swearing, just looking like thugs, absolute thugs. And of course, that didn't achieve anything at all. We're no better off, no worse off. But what it does do is it can ruin your life personally. So for me, I was away on a holiday, and I came back, and I got pulled up at the airport and interviewed on terrorism charges. So I was interviewed under what they call Section 17 and then 18, I think it is, of the UK Terrorism Act. Now, I was a young man. I think I was 19 or 20 when that happened. And I'd had no criminal record. I hadn't gone around battering anybody or spraying graffiti, nothing like that, really. It was all just hardline rhetoric. And so I got pulled into that, and it put the fear of God into me. And I thought, well, that's my life over. I can't travel anymore. I'm never going to get a good job now. That's everything over. And I was very crestfallen. So I ended up leaving that group. And then shortly after that, I think it dissolved anyway and fell apart. And I was a bit hopeless for a while. And then an old friend of mine got in touch with me a few years after that. This was maybe the winter of 2020, or maybe the beginning of 2021. Got in touch with me and told me about something different that was on the scenes, and that I should join up that, get back into political activism. So I joined up quite tentatively. Everybody that's been on the more extreme side of things knows how paranoid everyone is. So we were all, quite. And this is a couple of years before Homeland was founded. So I didn't even have Homeland. But what I did have is I got access to Kenny Smith. And I came into that sort of with my hope crushed. There's what we call black pilled, like really black pilled.
Yep.
Totally hopeless, thinking there's not really any solution. So I started going along to these hikes. And then I spoke to Kenny, and then me and Kenny got in touch. And I was, like I said, the arrogance of a young man, tried to lecture him about the state of politics in the UK. A man who's been in nationalist politics for 30, maybe more years now. And he tore me apart.
I can just imagine it. I can just imagine it being there like, this kid, I can just imagine being like, this kid, just you wait.
What the hell are you talking about, young James? This is a load of nonsense. This isn't going to get you anywhere. You are not going to do any good for your people from the inside of a jail cell. And he's completely right. We've seen so many cases, particularly worryingly, of young men and women, teenagers, being thrown in jail under terrorism charges or under hate speech charges. When really they don't need to be there. So many of these cases, I was looking through. There's one that I wanted to talk about. It's very dire. That I believe illustrates how important it is that we need to get in there first and try and steer those young people away from those dangerous routes. Because best case scenario, very best case scenario, if you're a young man or a young woman and you fall into these extremist circles where you don't believe there's a political solution, and that, well, then the only solution left is violence. At the very best case scenario, you will end up in jail and with a criminal record. Very best case scenario. Worst case scenario, it goes even further than that. And God forbid we even think about what these young kids could get up to. So far, I don't think anything like that's happened, as far as I'm aware. I might be wrong. I haven't seen any news yet of a young person actually carry out a dangerous act or a terroristic act or anything like that. The ones that I've heard of have mainly been of kids getting their lives ruined. And that will let me segue on to another thing I wanted to talk about. The authorities, MI5, Hope Not Hate isn't an authority, but it works quite closely with policing. So Hope Not Hate, the MI5, even Prevent, I think are dangerous for these young people. So what will happen is, again, best case scenario, before anything bad happens, if it would at all, because most of it's just online ranting and things like that from these young people. But best case scenario, these people capture them and ruin their lives. They don't sit them down and try and set them on the right path or talk to them about what's going on. There's one example here that I found, Rhiannon Rudd. And I hope, if you don't mind, if I pull up the article and talk a little bit about that as a case study. So Rhiannon Rudd was a terror suspect, and she was, I believe, 15 years old when she became the youngest girl charged with terror offences in the UK.
15.
So 15. And it started even younger than that. So at the age of 14, I'm getting this from a BBC News article here. I could send you the link to that if you're wanting to put it up on the screen.
Yeah, I can do. I'll see if I can pull it up for the audience. If not, I'll show it in post.
I'll send it to you in
post as well.
But yeah, so at the age of 14 is when this all started. So she had gotten in touch with a horrible man called Christopher Cook, who was an American. And anybody who's been in nationalism long enough knows that the Americans are the cranks. I don't know what it is in the water over there, but things like Atomwaffen and all these groups.
Same stuff that's turning the frogs gay.
Well, well, it's a lot worse than that. We don't really get actual far right terrorism in the UK, but in America they do. And this guy had gotten in touch with her. I think it looks like it was through a stepdad, and he was radicalizing her into this black pill ideology, and sort of things like terror cram and things like that. So bad, in fact, and it makes me sick to my stomach to say this, but she had been talked into sending explicit images of herself, possibly as young as 14, at least not 15, to this man. So this was a woman this is a young woman, a young girl who was groomed by an utterly insane individual in America. And it looks like they had some sort of grooming relationship here. So
Horrendous.
she's going through that ordeal. So while she's going through that ordeal, while she's being exploited by this man in America, who's on the FBI watch list, and the FBI knew about this, by the way, and didn't bring charges until after. Our authorities knew about this. They knew that she was being groomed and abused, and what they decided to do was charge her with terrorism and take her outside her home and put her in a kid's home, away from her family, away from her mother. And what ended up happening was she ended up taking her own life at age 15 in that home. Her mother had warned the home that she believed that her daughter Rhiannon was suicidal, and the home said, "Oh, don't worry, we'll look into it." Wasn't enough. So this young woman, 14, I wouldn't even say young woman, teenager, kid, she was groomed at age 14 by extremists over in America, and the authorities, instead of helping her and understanding that she was a victim, charged her with terrorism, ruined her life further, took her away from her mother, and she ended up taking her own life. Our mother has gone on record to say that she believes that the authorities are responsible. Sorry, just to correct, at age 16, she was found dead, and she'd hanged herself. So that's the sort of fate that can be put upon these young, vulnerable people if somebody doesn't step in. Now, I bring up that case to back up my point that I don't believe the authorities can help, at least not the way that they're doing things at the moment. I believe what's happening is that the authorities, instead of recognising these children as victims and trying to give them help, I believe that they want to pad out the convictions for terrorism under the far right category. Now, the furthest this young girl ever got in terms of terrorism was she downloaded a bomb-making manual. Didn't have the materials to make anything. Didn't have any set plans. But now, when it says downloaded, I think what's probably happened is this guy or someone in his circles has sent her a file.
Yeah, I can see what you mean.
Yeah, and now a lot of these apps, like I don't know what app she was using, whether it was Discord or Telegram or whether it was over the internet, whatever it was. A lot of them, if you can go into your permissions, you can change this, but a lot of them have it set up so that things automatically download, like images and so forth.
WhatsApp does it as well by default.
WhatsApp does it, yeah. It could very well have been WhatsApp that she was on. I don't know.
Because I
But
end up
I
I
think,
end up going through my photos, and I got a bunch of random photos on there. Like, when did these
oh
come
yeah,
through? And it's because they automatically
memes from
download.
groups that you're in and things like that. Yeah, they automatically download.
Yes. Sorry, please
So
carry on.
I don't even know if she went out of her way to look for this stuff.
Mm.
So at the very worst, she's been sent a file that's downloaded on her phone. Again, 14, 15-year-old girl, is she going to be making a bomb? Hasn't got the materials for it. She hasn't got the money to buy the materials. Do you know what I mean? So what's happened is, instead of the state and the authorities and journalists scum like Hope Not Hate getting in touch and trying to bring her away from that path and show her something positive instead, a way that she can advocate for her beliefs without going off the deep end and spiraling into political violence. Instead, they've prosecuted her as if she's a criminal and ruined her life and quite possibly been responsible for ending it. And that's just one case. There's so many more when I've looked into this that have come up of young men mostly, but young women as well, falling down that path. Many of them end up taking their own lives, and that's why I think it's intolerably malicious when groups like Hope Not Hate say that we are the Homeland Party, which I'm a member of, is grooming young people into Nazism or violence or things like that. Because after I've met Kenny Smith and he's helped me out and shown me the way, I haven't been involved in anything like that. There's so many young men that Kenny had gotten in touch with through the Homeland Party or previously, who he's turned away from that and put towards real work, making positive changes in their local community. So we don't go around starting fights. It's not in our interest. We're not interested in doing that. We don't go around graffitiing, smashing up shops. We don't engage in illegal activities. For one, you can't help people from the inside of a jail cell, and for second, it's distasteful and it's wrong, and it doesn't align with our beliefs. So instead, what we do, myself, for example, we've been up at Forfar Loch, which is just up the road from me, not too far, and we've been helping out the park ranger because he's not getting enough funding, he's not getting enough staff to manage the loch. So we've been tearing out invasive species that spread like wildfire. We've been planting new trees. We've been picking up litter, cleaning up the local area. And that's just over in Forfar. We've been doing the same here in Dundee, where I live. And again, that's just the guys in my area, just the activists for the Homeland Party here. All across the country, things like that are happening. There was a lad down south, just north of London, who'd organised a lot of pick with his community. And I think he got 20 members of his community involved to go on this litter pick. And they were picking up nitrous canisters that were being used for drug use. We've done similar things in Dundee. We've been picking up bottles that have been left by winos, underpasses and things like that on our litter picks. Thank God we haven't come across any needles yet, but we're very careful. We've always got our PPE on when we go out for that reason.
I just see the way the countries are going at the moment. It's only a matter of time before you find something like that, or God forbid, a kid finds something like that. You know what I mean?
Well, that would be the worst case scenario. I remember when I was a kid, even at the play park, finding needles, and my mum chasing me away from that. It's pretty bad. Dundee is the drug death capital of Europe. We have the most of Europe, not the UK, Europe. Dundee is. I know it's quite bad in Wales, some parts of Wales, with the unemployment and the deaths of despair, but it's particularly bad in Dundee and has been for a long time. I think we were the Valium capital of Europe as well for a while, and heroin capital of Europe. It's everywhere in Dundee. It's a real problem. If young people don't get sucked into dangerous sort of like crank ideologies, what they'll end up doing often is falling into hard drug use as well, because it's so hopeless up here. And it's a real tragedy. We had a campaign a short while ago, a leafleting campaign trying to address the drug problem in Dundee and trying to hold our MPs to account. Now, unfortunately, our MPs here seem more bent on the idea of safe consumption rooms, where you're enabling this. And it sounds like a nice idea, and I was convinced that this was a good idea many, many years ago, when it came up as a topic in school. We were doing a sociology course and this came up. And, everybody was convinced it was a good idea, but we've seen now that it does directly lead to deaths and overdoses. And people do die in these rooms. So, yeah, it's an absolute tragedy. But going back to something positive, my life has completely turned around since I got involved with Homeland Party. I'm doing really well for myself now. One thing I didn't touch on is that back in the day when I was involved with these other misled kids, really, with this extremist shit that you see online, we thought everything was going to kick off any minute now. So none of us bothered to go to college, university, plan for the future, set up pensions, bother learning to drive, because we all thought it was going to kick off any minute, so there was no point. So it really sort of stunted our growth. But what I've been able to do since then is I've found myself honest, good employment. I've started planning for the future. I've got myself a lovely little flat here. I've even been investing into pension accounts, everything. And I'm going to be learning to drive soon. I've been putting it off, but it's about time to do it. I'm going to be learning to drive this year.
Just keep an eye on those pensions, though. Ursula von der Leyen has her eye on those pensions, so just keep an eye. Just keep an eye on them.
Well, my pensions took a dip after the American stock market dip. Went down by about 12.5%, which was horrible to see happen overnight. But they've sort of creeped back up now. So
it'll recover, I think.
Yeah, I've not quite gotten into investing yet, but I have set up 2 or I think 3 now pension accounts just to be safe, because sometimes what can happen is your pension could drop completely to nothing. So I wanted to make sure I don't have all my eggs in the same basket. Yeah, my life's completely turned around. I've got a great group of friends now that I can bring around my family, that I'm happy to have around my family. I'm happy to have around my other friends that I know won't embarrass me, that I know won't make my friends and my family worry about me. And we do help each other out. We're quite tight-knit in Homeland Party, especially my branch here in the northeast of Scotland. We're very close. Josh Fernie, who you've spoken to, of course, is a fairly recent addition to us in the northeast of Scotland, and he's a cracker, isn't he? He's a great guy. But yeah, we've really managed to do some positive things here through Homeland. As an example, there's lots of high-rise flats in Dundee, like these big tower blocks, like out that Judge Dredd film, and they are dire. They are absolutely dire. And what happened is we had a storm earlier this year, and one of these giant trees on that property had fallen down, blocking the footpath. And because it was winter as well, the grass to either side was it was like the Somme. It was just a muddy mess, which is it's fine for young able-bodied people like ourselves. We could just walk around, just go through the mud. That's fine. But if you're elderly and you walk with a cane or a Zimmer frame, or if you're a mother, there's a lot of mothers in this area who have a push pram. You can't now access that path. So me and a friend of mine who's also in the Homeland Party got out. We took out our branch saws that we'd bought for up in Forfar, and we chopped this tree to pieces. I posted something about it on my Twitter. I'll send you the images for that if you want to put them up. We chopped them up into smaller pieces and then lugged them about, because this tree must have weighed a ton. Like 2 big lads like ourselves could not lift it, so I had to chop it up into lots of pieces, and then we were able to clear the path, and now it's remained clear. So that has been a really positive change. And this happened. We did this 2 weeks after the storm, when the tree had fallen down, because that's when it was reported to us and we clocked it. So we went to go and fix it. The council, no doubt, had been contacted about that and hadn't done anything about it. And these high rises were council housing as well, so you'd think that would be a top priority. But no, the council hadn't bothered to go out, so it was left to us. So we decided that we were going to try and make a small but positive change. It only took us a couple of hours of being there, and we were able to free up that path for people with their shopping and prams and things like that. So we were quite proud. So that's why I'm very proud of being in the Homeland Party, is that I've been able to really turn my life around and go from so it's embarrassing to talk so negatively about yourself, but to go from a cringe like edgelord teenager to a man that I'm quite proud to be, that I hope my community can be proud of as well, because of the Homeland Party and the things I've been able to do through the Homeland Party. So it really has made a huge difference in my life.
Oh, fantastic. No, I just didn't. I look at his basis to sort of jump in and ask a couple of things there, but I was just like, I just want to let this guy speak. Like, this is, it's just
Sorry
going
about
to
that.
somebody. No, no, it was amazing. It's
You
just
might you
like,
might have to do a lot of clipping if I repeat
that's
myself.
that's no problem at all. It was just like, there's so many things in there. Because every now and again, I was looking over to my phone. I'm just making notes on things which I might want to go back to, and ask about. And there was a lot of things which you would have already heard from James there, which speak to a lot of things which we see going on in the UK at the moment: institutional failure, politicization of the authorities, whether it be the police, Prevent, MI5, the failures of Prevent lead into things like Southport, but they'll take 15 or 14-year-old Rhiannon Rudd away from her parents when she's already at her most vulnerable, when she's being groomed by these disgusting figures online that are preying on her, and that the only solution that the authorities seem to see is to try and pad the stats with regards to terrorism charges, so that they can whip up this narrative, almost like the people in 1984 that are whipping up the narrative around Goldstein as this mythical figure. It's kind of what they're doing with the far right at the moment. But the thing which me and James were going to go into now was it's almost like a war that's taking place on young people and on their minds, making them feel as hopeless and as, demoralized as possible. It's almost like this, generation long struggle session that's going on, something straight out of Mao's Cultural Revolution almost. And we're going to talk a little bit about that now, sort of maybe a little bit about how obviously James navigated that headspace. Obviously, we heard a little bit about the dark roads it went into, and a little bit about how it's sort of started to turn up a lot better for him now, how we sort of got things a lot better for him now. And what we think, if you're a young person listening to this, things which you may be being aware of and things which you can do that are actually going to take you in a positive direction. Have you got anything to say to that? Anything which we can say about that, James?
Yeah, certainly. Just going back to the institutional failings there. I don't believe it's by accident. I think it's on purpose, especially with
Me
this
too.
the persecution of vulnerable young people, like the case of Rhiannon Rudd and many others as well. One of the things I wanted to make clear is that a definition has changed within our lifetimes, and the definition of terrorism that everyone agreed on was it was an act of violence or intimidation in pursuit of a political end, right? And
Okay.
that's not just applied to one political sphere. That's for everybody, and I don't think anyone has a disagreement with that definition at all. That is what terrorism is.
Mm.
Whether you are an Islamic terrorist or a communist terrorist, there's been a lot of that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Far left terrorism, anarchist terrorism. Going all the way back, there's an example, Guy Fawkes Night, who we celebrate.
Mm.
He was a Catholic terrorist. Who was doing that. I believe he was he was a Catholic terrorist. Tried to blow up Parliament and kill the king.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, and nobody has a problem with that definition of terrorism. But
Mm.
they've changed it now. They've changed it to where it's not just that. It's one thing that I've seen quite a lot of. There was a case a couple of years ago of it was an older man who was mentally deficient, neurodivergent or whatever you would call it,
Mm.
and he was sentenced under terrorism legislation because of his collection of books. Now, the judge in that case, and I'd need to pull up specifics if you want to show that to the audience, but the judge in that case recognised in the trial that owning each of these books was not, and a lot of them were history books as well, and some non-fiction novels. Owning each of these books by themselves is not a crime. But because you have this many of them and this collection of them, and this guy, he bought them all off of Amazon. It's perfectly legal to buy. Because of the collection that you've got, we are now going to be charging under the Terrorism Act. And that's what happened to that older gentleman. I forget his name now. It's been a while since I've looked at the case. But this is what I mean by the diluting of definitions. And I think it's done to, like in the Rhiannon case, pad out the statistics. Of they want to make the far right a boogeyman. And don't get me wrong, there are awful people on that side, like that Mr. Cook who abused that young woman, Rhiannon. Horrible people, again, American, not British. But there is not, concerts being blown up. There is not mass stabbings being done by members of the far right, mass shootings. It's just not happening. And the ones that you do see invariably are always somebody that's mentally ill, and that nobody got in there to help them and push them away from that path before they got there. And I'm not trying to downplay any victims of anything that's happened. I'm not pro-terrorism. I never will be. I never really was. I never got involved in anything dodgy like that. Like I says, I've not got a criminal record to this day, which I'm pleased to say. I haven't let myself down in that way. But sorry, carry on.
No, sorry. I think a lot of it is, well, as you said, we mentioned with like the war that's going on young people, and a lot of them are reacting, and this is why I think it speaks to that importance of being able to get them to not get them in that way, but show them the appropriate and positive ways of this, because they're almost reacting as though they're animals backed into a corner, like a dog that you back into a corner. And then when it sees no other route of escape, whatever, naturally, then what's it going to do? It's going to lash out. It's going to fight for its life, right? I think and I think you spoke to that a little bit as well when you said you were in that headspace. It's almost like, again, you're feeling that your people and
I was terrified.
Yeah.
Yep. I was terrified that my people in 100 years' time might not exist, and that beautiful Celtic culture that we've got in Scotland will be gone forever. And I was terrified about that. And I didn't see there being any solution through like that same line. There is no political solution, which is deeply, deeply harmful, I think. So that phrase, just to reiterate again, because I don't think I worded it as happily as I wanted to. The people who say that there is no political solution I think, are tacitly responsible for the conversation shifting to political violence. Like I say, you were talking about backing a dog or a wild animal into a corner. Well, they're terrified. They don't have a means of escape. They don't have a means out. Especially when the state and security forces and journalists are closing in around them, or even far left adjutants closing in around them, doxing them, getting them fired from their job. Okay, so you've just made sure that these people have nothing to lose.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? And this, I think what they're engaging is a dragnet policy, where they're casting out this wide net with weak definitions and spurious definitions of what terrorism is, what violence is. We've always heard words like silence is violence, or your words are violent, violent speech. Speech isn't violent. But this dragnet policy, it's out there so that they can rake in as a big a catch as possible that they can term as the far right. And what they don't do is look at each individual fish that they've caught and gone, is this person really dangerous? And a lot of these people are just kids, and they're not dangerous. These are kids who often, like myself, had no criminal record, weren't going around engaging in drugs or theft or property destruction, intimidation, violence. They weren't engaged in any of that. And like I said, I think it's just to pad out the numbers, to make us out to be a boogeyman, which further pushes the dog into the corner.
Yes.
Because then they'll take these really out there cases, which The media misrepresents, I think, and so do the court systems, when really what it should be is getting these people help. Instead, they charge them like the most violent, dangerous criminals in the world, and give them sentences that are ridiculously long as well, when rapists and paedophiles get off with months or community service. What they do by that is they'll then use these cases to discredit legitimate political action. Like the Homeland Party, we've seen Hope Not Hate do this. We've seen other journalist entities try and do that as well. We've even seen MPs, Maggie Chapman, for example, talking about how we need to be. I think she said, she was quoted as saying, the Homeland Party needs to be proscribed, whatever it is. And the Homeland Party is the only positive route for people that are worried about the state of their nation. So when you close down legitimate routes, you know what I mean? What do you end up with? You end up with people who could have had a way out into something productive, helping in their community, advocating for real change politically, advocating for real good policy that our country to follow. And instead, like you'd said, a great analogy, back them into a corner like a wild animal with no way of escape. And of course, the animal's terrified.
And then be surprised and be called them bigoted when they bite, you know?
Of course. Exactly.
And, I think it's where you mentioned that where you mentioned that they want to prescribe you and stuff like that. And I think I wanted to ask this question was, do you think, because they've seen that your guys' focus is different, and I've noticed this, like other groups are on the right, and something that's really troubling me on the right, it doesn't, right and left are quite arbitrary. I think we got that from America, but on the nationalist, patriotic side of things, the one thing that's always seemed to happen is anytime one group starts to get a lot of traction, there'll be some sort of like containment vehicle set up for it. I think me and Josh talking about that. The reason why, sorry, my voice is going a minute. The reason why Farage and UKIP were pushed so hard back before was to contain the BNP and stuff like that. And now he's doing the same thing with Reform to contain other things. And that it always splinters. And that the thing where I've noticed with you guys is, and I spoke with Josh about this as well, the focus on that community political element. People, even if they look at some of the individual members and things that they put on social media about different things and they go, oh, maybe I don't agree with that, or maybe I think maybe that's even kind of repulsing, right? But they can see that the focus of the organization is very, very different, and it's building it from the ground up. It is a true grassroots movement.
Yes.
It's from the people coming itself. And because now we have this weird balance whereby, like, especially Labour are in bed with all the big businesses and globalists, and they don't care about the working class anymore. This is
for a long time.
It's an actual working class thing, and they can see that. They can see that it's different. And do you think that maybe they're scared of that, and that's why they want to? Because they realize that the work, like I say, the working class, but just the regular person, they're in the majority, right? We've got 100 MPs or 400 MPs, whatever it is in Parliament. We've got in terms of like a regular population, just of regular people, that's up in the tens of millions, high tens of millions, you know what I mean? So they know they're easily outnumbered. And do you think they're trying to do all these things, discrediting, trying to say we should prescribe them this and that, taking out the sensible approach?
Absolutely, it's dirty political tactics. Politics is a filthy business anyway. It always has been. Yeah, absolutely terrified. They know that they're unpopular with the people. Labour, for example, barely scraped by to get in. They got less votes than Jeremy Corbyn did when he was trying to run, when he was contesting the Conservatives. The only reason they got in is because people lost faith with the Conservatives. So unpopular Labour got in because the Conservatives were unpopular. And we have seen a bit of an upswell for Reform at the start, and that's very quickly disappearing away. Their councillors are leaving en masse. Their voter base is leaving them en masse because they feel absolutely betrayed by this. I don't like the term civic nationalism, but I will use it because people understand it. By this civic nationalist bent that's put on. Now, I don't like the term civic nationalism because it's an oxymoron. Nationalism means the people. Natio, I think it's the Latin for the birth, the blood. Do you know what I mean? It's for the people. A nation doesn't refer to a geographic boundary. It refers to the people within that geographic boundary. You know, the tribes that made up an ethnicity, that then made up a people, like the Scots, for example, or the Welsh, or the English. You know, England isn't named. The English aren't called English because they live in England. England is called England because that's where the English live. You know, Welsh, it's a bit different. I think in the Welsh language, it's the same way, but Wales and Welsh comes from the English word for foreigner, which I think is a bit rude. If you're English, you're an Anglo-Saxon, and you rock up into Breton territory, and just call everyone their foreigners, that's I think that's a bit rude. Even Scotland was named Scotland after the Scots. You know,
Same for
so I don't like
Ireland,
this
you know,
term.
same for Ireland, obviously.
Yes, yeah, named for the Irish. And you see this all over the world. France named after the Franks. Germany named after the Germans. Do you mean Russia named after the Rus, which were the people that moved into that area from Finland and Sweden, Sweden and stuff. So you see this all over the world. Do you know what I mean? The only real exception is America, and that's a more civic nationalist state. But I don't like that term civic nationalism because you cannot have nationalism with a national plurality, a plurality of nationalities. You can't have that. Do you know what I mean? Like, even Britain itself famously was a union. You know, it's the United Kingdom and was United Kingdoms. You know what I mean? It's a political union. It's not a nation. It's a country. It's not a nation. So I don't like that term. But yeah, this civic nationalism that gets pushed, people get hoodwinked. They get baited in with one thing, and then boom, before you know it, Zaya Yusuf's in charge. Do you know what I mean? And then Reform's losing all of its support.
And especially when it seemed that as though he basically bought his way there, you know, and it's like, well, hang on, because I remember James O'Keefe, one of the journalists out in America, he does a lot of like the undercover, you know, scoops on like big pharma executives and all stuff like that. I find his content very, very good in that regard. But he was one saying when he was going through all this stuff, like he was being persecuted by the FBI, the previous organization that he was with turned on him. But they're saying, you know, he's gone through a lot of stuff to try and just keep bringing people, you know, good quality journalism and the truth. And he said, well, you know, if the price isn't your life, then, you know, you have a price, you can be bought. You know, that was one of the famous quotes that he said when he sat down. I was saying, well, well, and that's what really made me disillusioned with Reform is that, well, it's gone to the highest bidder. I'm like,
and that thing that happened with Reform cannot happen in the Homeland Party because of the way we've set up our constitution. Our National Council and our chairman are held responsible by the members, and like nobody can buy their way in to the Homeland Party. The way we've got it set up, I'm sure we can maybe link or if your viewers are interested, they can look up the Homeland Party constitution and look at how we've set ourselves up. Reform was set up as a dictatorship, really, where there's one man in charge and the members don't get any say. And that's just not the case in the Homeland Party. Every year at the annual general meeting, we get together, the members are invited and the members can vote on certain proposals as to how the party is run. So that's it. Like I said, incredibly grassroots. We're not run top down. We've got wonderful teams that are given a good bit of free rein to work on their own projects, which you don't see in Reform, you don't see in any other political party. And our approach is sensible nationalism and community politics, especially community politics. The only political party that really engages in community politics, other than the Homeland Party, is the Lib Dems. And the only reason the Lib Dems are still politically relevant, the only reason they're still politically relevant is because they are so deeply entrenched in community politics. You'll see that Lib Dems almost get nobody in at the parliamentary level. Like, we've not had a Lib Dem prime minister, or a co-prime minister, a deputy prime minister. During when was that? 2011? or
Yeah, I think
earlier.
so because there was a
Nick
coalition at
Clegg,
one point, wasn't there? Yeah.
yeah. And again, only got in on a coalition, buggered that up, excuse my French, so badly that they'll never have electoral success again at that level. But they have their staying power, whereas any other party would have been ruined by that. Like we've seen
Mm.
the Tories getting ruined. The Lib
Mm.
Dems haven't been. They've got that sticking power because they're embedded in their communities. Now, almost nobody votes for their council elections, and nobody really goes for the community council. Nobody really gives much of a damn about that, and really it is important. These are the building blocks to political power, and this is what we're pursuing in the Homeland Party. We're climbing the political ladder. We're not going to be running for prime minister anytime soon. It's going to have to start. We need to build our foundational base. We need to make sure that's rock steady beneath us before we can approach these things. Because otherwise, you'll see, like what happened with the BNP, they never really achieved huge success. They had a couple of MPs, I think, and a few more MEPs and councillors as well. And then that party folded and fell apart from within. And then their support was eaten up by Farage with UKIP, which turned out to be a disaster. And then he moved on after he accomplished that, dropped out of politics for a while, and then came back in with the Reform Party. So we've just Nigel Farage is poison to nationalist politics because he sells himself as a nationalist, and then he undermines nationalism every single time. And I don't think he can be trusted. I think people are now waking up to that. And
Yeah,
I
I think
think the
I think some people have said like maybe he done some good things when he was a member of the European Parliament and stuff like that. But it always, the one thing that's always struck me now looking back on it at the time, because at the time when the EU referendum, you know, Brexit, Leave or Remain happened, I was, you know, only in like my first year of college, so I wasn't old enough to vote. You know, I was like about 15 or 16, wasn't very politically active, didn't know what the hell was going on, was one of those classic people that even a lot of people still have the outlook today, oh, it doesn't affect me, so what do I need to take care, what do I need to care with it for, not realizing that you may not care for politics, but politics cares about you and does affect you.
Oh yes, absolutely.
But the result came in, and what in theory should have been a crowning moment of victory for
Yeah.
UKIP, or some nationalist group who wanted out of the EU, which for all the people who say Brexit has failed, tell me in what way, other than in just a referendum vote on that day, 52 to 48, anything with it has been enacted. But the moment
Very
that
well said.
happens, he resigns. He abdicates. He jumps ship, and it's like, well, isn't this your crowning moment of victory?
Yeah.
And it just never.
No,
It just.
it wasn't. Well, it was him and UKIP that got it done because without them, there would not have been that pressure on the Tory party to push for that. So again, this is more sort of dirty politics. The Tories were ceding a lot of votes. They were losing their base to UKIP. So David Cameron had to implement a referendum. He basically stole policy and promises, party promises from UKIP in order to get that base back. And then he did, held a vote. I don't think he expected it to go that way. I don't think
No, he
the Tory
absolutely
party
didn't.
expected it to go that way at all. I think they underestimated the support for Brexit. And I think a lot of people forget that the average person who voted for Brexit, not the business owners, not the like large business owners, the small business owners, the working man, the big base in the north of England as well that supported Brexit. It was a proxy vote for anti-immigration, and none of that's been enacted, and it's gone completely the other way. And instead of getting large but almost manageable, if it was reined in, numbers of EU migration, we're now getting about 1 million a year, if not more. I haven't counted up the Boris wave. We'll find out in the census in the years to come. We're getting over 1 million, I think, non-EU migrants now every single year, and there's only so long, and it's increasing.
Yeah.
And nobody's getting deported. The Labour Party was banging their drum about deporting. I think it was a couple hundred, maybe 3,000.
Or
It's
they
nowhere
said
near enough.
I think they said they deported a couple of thousand, but when you actually ran the numbers during over that same time, they said they deported these people over. You still had a net gain of like nearly 7,000 people. So it was just
Yeah,
a complete lie. And
it's just pissing in the wind, isn't it?
I pulled up the graph that I talked about the other day. It was I think it was either in a Telegraph or something like that. And it was a graph showing that the Keir Starmer is like the highest influx of migrants coming in over whatever period it was, whether it was 30 days or during his premiership. I think it might have been during when he took over that he like Boris, like we talk about the Boris wave and absolutely, but even like Rishi Sunak and then Keir Starmer's like all the way up here is like just in his first like 300 days or so. What's going on there? Sorry, I'm not sure what happened there. It's just a lot of static coming across my headphones for some
That's
reason.
all right. Is it coming from me?
I'm not sure. I'll pause the record in a second. Right. Right. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. We had a fridge-based invasion of the audio, and we're now back to it. But I kind of forgot where we were. That's the only problem now. I kind of forgot where we were.
Well, we were talking about. I believe, and I think you commented on it, that you could see it, that the establishment's absolutely terrified of the Homeland Party.
Yes.
I think the reason they're terrified is that they know if we get in, Labour, the Tories, the Greens, everyone else is never going to see political power again. Not because we're going to abolish democracy and vote, not at all, but just because nobody will ever vote for them again. Once, when the people finally get what they vote for, finally start getting that, they're going to go, oh, so it was that easy. It was that easy. I just voted and I got what I wanted. Why have all these other parties not managed to do that? Why have they been failing? Oh, it's deliberate. Or they never wanted
Exactly.
to do it.
It's by design. And it's lovely when, all through when we were growing up, it was all through school about multiculturalism and all cultures are created equal and all this stuff. It was drilled into us.
Do you want a horrific example of that?
Yeah, go on. Oh, right.
So
We've got
this is
10 minutes left in this meeting. So,
all right.
yeah,
So
we'll go
I'll
on
be
and
quick. We were in a like RME class, like religious moral education, philosophy class, things like that. I don't know what you call it in Wales, but that sort of class.
yeah, RE
And
or PSE, yeah.
yeah. So this was right after the attacks on Charlie Hebdo,
Yeah.
where journalists and artists were brutally murdered in an act of terrorism
Yes.
by Muslim terrorists. And our teacher, white woman, ginger as well, she in that class, and I remember it clearly, and I remember being outraged by it at the time, said that Charlie Hebdo shouldn't have drawn Muhammad, shouldn't have published it. And it didn't say quite that they deserved it, but that it was, she compared the two things as being equal. Publishing a cartoon.
It was insinuated. It was insinuated.
Yeah, publishing a cartoon and an act of terrorism. So that's how bad it was in schools back then, in like the 2010s. Could you imagine what it's like in 2025?
I know. It's only, from what I've been told, it's only gotten worse because
me and my girlfriend, we've agreed that when we're married and we have kids, they're getting homeschooled.
I think it's
or privately tutored. We're not putting them through public school.
No, absolutely not. Or at the very least, you got to be armed with being able to, fight the programming that's sort of going to be going in and being like very invested. Because I know a lot of people around here. It's a very, 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 very depressed socioeconomic area, and literally people with both parents having to work, and just with, many other things at play, and obviously just people just not being able to get the help that they need a lot of the time. I'm just going to pause it a sec.
Oh, yeah. Well, I got this one secondhand.
But yeah, sorry about that, guys. Right, so we were saying, let's do it again. I don't know what's going on. It might not be your fridge, to be honest, but it's going to keep recording a bit. It might not be.
It might be this laptop. The fans might be going. Let me check the temperatures.
It wasn't too bad anyway. But technology's great.
I'm at 55 degrees Celsius on the CPU temperature.
Oh, a bit warm.
Yeah, just a little bit.
But yeah, and it's a conversation that me and my girlfriend have had in various parts as well, because I've seen as very, very important. She's a lot less politically invested and worried than I am about it, which I'm like, come on, we got to be, thinking about this, like,
At the
and
same time, you want to shield your partner from the horrors as
yeah,
well.
absolutely, absolutely. I'm just
It's,
like, 'cause I've seen the horrors that's going on inside it, and through my conversations I've had with people as well. So, I work in a gym on an educational establishment, extracurricular,
I
nothing
saw
really.
you were a personal trainer, aren't you?
Yes, yes. So
Perfect.
work in
I need
a.
somebody like you in my life.
There we go. Maybe,
It's fairly.
maybe we can have a bit of a conversation. Maybe we can have a
That'd
bit
be
of a
good.
talk. But no, I was talking because one of the kids that I won't go into specifics, but he was just telling me about some of the things because we just got talking about these kinds of things, and it kind of reinforces me a little bit. But when people say there's no political solution, and I to myself to what we've said in this conversation now, I probably parroted that at some point in the past, like maybe reposted something with it, and I'm thinking now, being like,
Sure, we all have in our moments of
yeah,
darkness.
just being like, okay, maybe maybe a different outlook is good, and there is a political solution, or we should certainly hope so anyway. Because if there isn't, there really is an indictment
Well,
on.
the establishment doesn't want us to find a political solution because they don't
Mm,
want a solution to these problems
yes,
because they don't see
absolutely.
them as problems. They want them to
Mm.
continue.
And
Um,
go and going back to that school example, they don't see the problem of the sexualization of children in schools, or putting all of this Marxist
yeah.
stuff in their head in school.
Oh,
They don't
yeah.
see it as a problem. And when it was the Catholic Church, for example, that was doing all of these horrendous things, say we want at least people, Catholics included, for the most
Mm.
part, would be like, no, this is horrible, this is going on, get them out, and excommunicating these things. But
A
when
lot
it
of people
happens in a
left the
public
church over it.
school, hmm
You know?
and
And just
then,
like that, people are now pulling their kids out of school, just
hmm
like they were pulling their kids out of church. Um,
hmm
and it does happen. Like even besides that, even besides the deliberate attempt to sexualize children, the co-ed schools where, and I'm not going to be advocating. This is not Homeland Party policy to, as far as I know, to end co-ed schools and have boys, girls schools and girls schools. It's not party
hmm
policy, but it's just something I've noticed where even when you've had a degraded culture like ours, where teenagers want to be grown up, right?
hmm
The one thing teenagers don't want to be is teenagers. They want to be adults. That's why they start smoking, drinking underage. They try and emulate the things that
hmm
only adults can do. And part of that, and it was pretty bad in my school. Like for a while, Dundee was also the teenage pregnancy capital of Europe.
hmm
And I think we had that title for a few years running, lost it a couple of years, got it back. There was a lot of things like that happening in school. Some really horrific incidents as well with underage boys and girls sending each other images. This is when like camera phones were quite a big thing for the first thing, really. The parents didn't have camera phones, but the kids did,
hmm
that sort of thing. Why would you want your kids anywhere near that?
hmm
Do you know what I mean? Like we had a girl. It was awful what happened to her. Where she'd been led on by a boy, sent him images, and they got passed around the whole school.
yeah.
And it's just like even before all this new weird sexuality stuff in schools, it was pretty bad. Um,
Mm,
Even before this sort of gender bending stuff and transgenderism and
mm,
I identify as a horse or a caterpillar and all that. There's furries now in schools.
hmm
I've come to find out that furries are now
hmm
a thing, and kids are going to
Yeah,
school with.
cool story, which I'll go into for that for somebody who
All
I
right,
work
yeah,
with,
of
because I
course,
just
yeah,
noticed we got about 2 minutes left on this. So that we'll just finish up this before we'll start up one more meeting if it's possible, because I just got
yeah,
a couple more
perfect.
things I
I've
want to
got all
go
day.
over.
Yeah.
But that girl, is she like okay now? Do you know? Like the girl that had her photos sent around the school and stuff?
No, I haven't. I didn't really keep up to date with anybody from school. I sort of moved on with my life, and I moved
Mm,
away. And like, I didn't go to college after high school, so I
mm,
didn't or uni, so I didn't stay around people like that. But as far as I know, like for the years that I did keep in touch with her after that, it was pretty bad. Um, like she was pretty scarred, but she might well be on a different track now. I think this is about 10 years later.
So I hope so. Just because it shows, like, who you trust certain things with as well, isn't it? At that age, obviously, it just shows that kids necessarily aren't meant to be trusted with everything.
Well,
That
exactly.
unlimited
Yeah.
freedom. Right. I'll pause this one and then we'll set up one more. Awesome. Right. So I mentioned that I was just going to go into, I say a funny story, but it's really not funny when you get down to the thing of it. But there's a school, somebody whom I used to work with, I believe she moved to Australia not too long ago. But she worked as a teaching assistant down in a school in a part of Wales is
Mhm.
relatively close to where I'm located. I don't want to say exactly where, but apparently they were, if like kids said they were a cat and stuff like that, and the teacher had to, address them as a cat basically, and keep affirming these delusions in the school. And I can't remember if it was a primary or a secondary school. I think it. I'm not going to try and say which one it was because I
You
can't
sure it
remember which
wasn't
one
in
it was.
nursery?
No, that's the
Because that
depressing
sort
thing.
of
It
thing of a
wasn't.
kid saying, I'm a cat, I'm a cat, you would expect to find in a nursery
But
where kids are playing games, but
but the school put in
in a
litter
high
trays down a
school?
lot. The school put in litter trays down.
Oh, see, are you certain? Are you absolutely certain to put down litter trays?
Well, this is what I've been told. This is what I've been told. So,
Oh,
admittedly, I haven't been to the
Christ.
school myself, but again, I don't know why a person. I don't
That's
know.
actually
With
hilarious.
the state of the world
I
that we
shouldn't
live
laugh.
in, yeah, I know. With the
Yeah.
state of the world that we live in, I'm putting more weight on it being truth than a lie. So,
Yeah.
and people can lie, obviously, but this is apparently what was going on. They were putting like litter trays down and stuff like that. It's mental, absolutely mental what's going on.
It's absolutely insane. And at that point, it's not a healthy environment to learn in either.
No.
If your head's being filled with this nonsense, the teacher has to pussyfoot around
Hmm.
all these new false identities, delusions. Um, it's absolutely insane. Like the real spread of this is quite telling as well. I remember when I was in high school, there was one transgender, and it was a lassie who started going by a boy's name, wore boys' clothes, and I think she grew out of it. But yeah, that was pretty rough. But now I'm hearing that it's all sorts of. I've got a female friend who works in schools, and she was saying about the funny thing that they're coming in wearing tails.
Hmm.
Like if we came back when I was in school, not to do boomer posting because I'm not a boomer. I am a zoomer. I am a young guy. I am a young guy still. Um, when I was in school, like we wouldn't get away with wearing like jumpers over our vests that had like band logos
Yeah.
or anything. You know what I mean? Like we weren't allowed to do that, and we had black shoes, and everything like that.
Yep.
Um,
Same when
Back
I was in
then,
school.
fashion was cardigans, but everybody
Mm.
liked cardigans back then. That was like the 2010s, big on
Hmm.
cardigans and big hair that you swept across and feathered and Justin Bieber.
Hmm.
I'm so glad that trend's dead. Uh, but the trends we've got now are way worse. Like they're so
Yes, it
much
does have to
worse.
be said. It does have to be said. But yeah, literally, when we were in school, it was kids would get sent home with a note for like the parents or whatever if they came in wearing trainers one day, even if because they were getting like new
Mm-hmm.
shoes the next day for school. Like literally, it'd be that strict if you didn't have your tie on to a certain standard, like up so high. Maybe you couldn't get the top button done up because you might have like a just really thick neck or whatever, and the
But
shirt's a
you've
bit too
grown
small.
over the
Yeah,
space of the school
exactly.
year. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But there was standards put in place. As you said, no. I think even my comprehensive school at one point they didn't even allow like out of the way like hair colors and stuff like that. So somebody comes in with like purple highlights
Yeah.
in their hair and stuff like that, I'd be like, what's going on? So yeah,
Well,
just
girls weren't allowed to wear makeup at my school.
hmm.
Girls weren't allowed to wear makeup because, and I think I don't want to be restricting people's freedoms where you don't have to, but I think that one's quite important because it's not about tempting the boys or anything like that. That's a lot of nonsense. It's more about these are kids. Do
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like they're not. You're not an adult. Why are you wearing makeup for? You're a kid. Like you'll ruin your skin as well.
Hmm.
Like and back then, what the lasses used to do was just cake their face in orange foundation, and they would even have foundation on their
Yeah.
lips.
Yeah,
That was
that's the
like,
way it
and
went.
then I have like a clear cut off there, as clear as my beard is to my neck was like the color difference. But yeah, I think that not again. I keep sounding like a grumpy boomer. But yeah, like I agree with those rules. Like kids need to be kids. Give them time to be children. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
You're like we got sex education at a very young age. I think our first sex education was in primary school, like in primary
Oh,
7. Yeah,
I didn't realize it
and the
was that
stuff we were
bad.
getting in high school as well. Like they spent way more time in high school talking about gay sex than they did about reproduction. Like I think what it should be is you should be taught
That's
about
only
safety,
and that's only gotten
but
worse.
your sex ed should basically be what it used to be back in the day, which is the farm animal talk, which is and I used to keep chickens when I lived in the countryside, and it was mummy, what's the boy one doing to the girl one? And it's like, oh, that's how they make chicks. You know what I mean? That's
Hmm.
how when a man and woman love each other very much, like that.
Yeah,
Keep it to, I think, more focus on reproduction as well, because we've seen falling birth rates, and that might help with it. But
massively.
divorcing the idea of sex from reproduction has been a disaster.
Hmm.
Um, I
There's one
think
of
that,
the big goals around the
and
sexual
then you
revolution.
get a lot of people that go, oh, it was like, yeah, it's a denigration of society. I really don't like the way that women are talked about. I've sort of become a bit of a trad feminist on some issues. I really don't like the way that women are talked about or exploited in our media. Um, like all the movie stars are essentially porn stars. They get their kit off in every film. I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable. I'm not some Puritan where I'm uncomfortable with nudity, like artistic nudity, but it's wholly excessive, and it's almost like these famous actresses are the world's famous prostitutes, and
Mm,
it's awful for women for that to be the out there role model for young women. I think
mm,
it's horrific, and I don't like the way that young men think about young women now because of things
yeah,
like that. I think it's very harmful. You know what I mean? To see women as just objects, I think is horrifically cruel.
yeah. I think
Women are so much more than that.
one of the biggest things I think that's changed their outlook on that is just the prevalence of pornography in the ease of access
Yeah,
to pornography, especially at those young
yeah,
ages, like extremely young when I
mm,
was exposed to it for the first time, and it's led me down some very very stunted and dark paths, and it does, no matter how much you try to rationalize it for whatever reason, it does change the way that you view things. And for the most
absolutely. Yeah.
part, definitely
Changes the way you view
not
yourself.
in for the most part, definitely not in a good way. And it's one of the things as well, I think, is it's like a drug at the end of the day, isn't it? It's like a drug, the way that it preys on your dopamine receptors and
Yeah.
stuff like that. You get that anticipation, then you get that brief high,
Not
and
just that,
then
but you can't, just like heroin, you need a bigger dose every time.
yeah, and then you end
Otherwise
up
you don't
going
feel
down
the
into
effects. Yeah, and it's
really, really extreme stuff, and it only gets worse and worse
sexual
and worse.
depravity. Yeah, um, absolutely. Like I was like I remember being even in primary school and finding like a page 3 of the Sun that was
Hmm.
like on the street. And I remember that, and that's bad enough for a kid to see, but
Hmm.
breasts are breasts. That's one thing.
Hmm.
But I was first exposed to. No, I didn't have a smartphone until I was 18. I think 17 or 18. And it's not because they didn't exist. It's not because I'm old. It's just that I was never interested in having one really. Um,
Hmm.
I had an iPod that you could get on the internet with. It was basically like a smartphone without the phone calls.
Hmm.
But I had like one of those little iPods, iPod Touch or whatever it was called. But I didn't have a computer, didn't have a PC, and even I was exposed to hardcore, horrible stuff quite early on. Like in schools, people come up to me, "Oh, you seen this video? You seen this video?" Um, and it's really horrible. It's disgusting. And you can't be led down that path. Luckily for me, I never fell into the path of being about like a pornography consumer. I always liked real girls.
Mm.
The real world. That's what I liked, was real girls in the real world. Um, but yeah, I think it's horrific, and I think it's an under discussed element of it as well. Is I try to live by the motto of don't do anything in your life that you couldn't explain to your dad. Do you know what
That's
I
a
mean?
good motto.
I think that's a good way to do it. Like if you were sat down across from your father and you explained what you were doing and why you were doing it, like if you would feel uncomfortable talking to him about it, don't do it. You know what I mean? And that's done me quite well. Like I never fell in hard with drugs. I was quite fortunate with that. I did fall into, like we are talking about earlier on this stream, extremist circles that were exploitative, and in most cases misguided too. Like for me, it was mostly other young guys, and we're all just very misguided because there wasn't that path out. But I didn't fall into anything that I wouldn't be proud explaining to my dad, or not proud, but I wouldn't be able to justify at the time talking to my dad about. I think that's probably a good way to leave you to live your life. It's worked for me anyway, for the most part. I never got involved big on alcohol. I used to go out quite a lot when I was younger and like drink on like nightclubs and stuff, like sometimes 3 nights a week. But I never got absolutely blutered. I was never at the point where I was drinking during the day, and now I very rarely take a drink. I'll have a beer every now and again to celebrate some activism, or have a glass of wine with my dinner. But I'm very, very dull and boring now. I don't get plastered.
Nah, it's the way to be. It's the way to be.
So,
It's the way of the future. The way of the future. But
plus,
Dave,
if I was drinking beer all the time, I'd be way fatter than I am now. And I'm trying to get a hold on that. I'm on the keto diet at the moment.
is there?
I've started seeing some results from the keto already. So trying to make positive changes for myself, and we promote that in the Homeland Party. If you join up, if anybody joins up, they'll know that there are other activists that they do their activism with. Will keep you on the right track. They'll keep you away from nonsense, and they'll get you into your fitness and looking out for you as well. It's a good thing to have a support network, because what I found is my very best friends, the best friends I've ever had, are all in the Homeland Party. Either I made friends with people in the Homeland Party, or my friends have all joined up. And that's, it's been hugely positive for me, because I'm not isolated like I was. I'm not alone like I was. I'm not vulnerable like I was. And I'm a lot wiser than I was when I was a teenager. And I really hope, like I came on today, I want to thank you for your invitation, because I really hope that this message can reach some young ears. It's important to me because I don't want anybody else ending up like that poor girl that we talked about earlier today. I want to see our youth thrive. They're our next generation. It's our job to pass them the cradle of our traditions, and raise them up to maintain those traditions, and to give them a life worth living, to give them jobs they can be proud about, honest work that they can be proud to do, and to live off of and raise their own children. And I think at the moment, the way our civilization is run is we've totally abandoned our inheritors. And I felt very abandoned.
I think it's just like when you just get that feeling that there's nobody else even around there again. It just adds to that hopelessness. It adds to that.
And you'll see as well, any of these cases. Yeah, if you look through any of these cases here, I've got a couple pulled up that I didn't talk about, but every single one of them, the young person that has been charged like that and is now either in prison or was let out, or has that black mark against their name now, every single one of them was isolated and alone and needed help. They needed friends around them. They needed older heads. Quite often there's fatherlessness in the home, or what looks like, and I don't want to be done for defamation, but what looks like a dodgy stepdad in the case of that young woman. He was from what I can remember, in an American Nazi prison gang. So these children are vulnerable. It's never somebody who's excelling and doing well in life, who's been provided opportunities, who has somewhere to go and something to do. So I want to make sure that for those vulnerable people, we can be there as the Homeland Party, to bring them in under our wing, show them that there is a pathway out, get them set up for their life, Try and find them good work. Try and find them purpose is a big one. And I think we succeed at that because we're so focused on volunteering and community action. I've always volunteered my whole life. I've volunteered when I was younger in youth groups. When I was older, I volunteered at a community cafe as well. And now I volunteer with the Homeland Party. And I can't imagine a world where I don't volunteer because I'd feel crap. Most jobs you do now, you can't really say you feel proud of, especially on the entry level. If you're working some desk job, you're not changing the world. You've not really done anything you could be proud of when you go home. But now I am. And when you do volunteer, giving these kids the opportunity to do that, to get out into their community, build ties in their community as well. Because what I don't want happening is, in the very worst case, is that they do commit some act of political violence. And they'll be committing that on their community. And terrorism's called terror because it's terrorism because it spreads terror in the community. And that's an awful thing to do to your people if you say you love them as a nationalist.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things you touched on there. And it goes back to, you finished that now, it goes back to that thing where you said you can't help people from inside a prison cell. And it's kind of like, again, by you going out and in that you may be in like this lapse of judgment or in this really big emotional lapse, whatever it may be, and you do something which you then can't take back. It's not only like the person whom you've done whatever it is to, or whatever, you know, the target of the outlet is that's suffering. It's your community, it's your family, it's your, you know, your friends that now they don't have that, they don't have you in the community anymore. Now that it'll probably change the way that they see you as well. So that's what I see with
it destroys relationships. Yeah, but I've also seen people being distrustful. Is it like kids that fall into that spiral? Even if they did have friends, they tend to cut off ties with their friends because they feel so miserable. They end up falling out with their friends, and then their friends are left at the end of this. You know, what the hell's going on? And the poor mothers as well and fathers. That poor lassie's mother, that poor lassie we're talking about, Rhiannon. I perish the thought. I don't know if she was an only child or if there were more children, but no parent wants to outlive their children. And to outlive your children because they took their own lives, because they didn't see any pathway forward, and our mother stated herself, she believes it was the state drove her to suicide. The authorities drove her to suicide. 16-year-old girl hanged herself in a kid's home. Absolutely brutal. And that didn't have to be the case.
No.
Do you know what I mean? If instead of pursuing a conviction and seeing these kids as dangerous, violent criminals, if they just viewed them as victims, especially in her case as a sexual victim of grooming, if they just viewed them as victims and tried to get them help and put them,
especially when they knew about it,
tried to get them involved in their community.
Yeah, especially when they knew about it. Yeah, say especially when they knew about it.
Yep, they knew about it and still convicted her. Still decided to mark her down as an awful criminal.
Yeah, and I just don't see how.
And you see that so many times with these kids.
Unless there's some serious kind of like politicization or just warping of the mind that's going on inside, like, I don't know, Prevent or MI5 or whatever the institution is, how you can't look at that situation, or how you look at that situation and think the appropriate response is to take the kid away from the family. Like, already the groomer is preying on whatever like present divide might be there, or whether it's like as you said, like the stepdad, so whether there's that like slight breakdown of the family that's already going on, they think, oh, let's make it worse, like let's take it away from her and put her in with a bunch of strangers. That just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, that's another thing as well, is if you're sending usually young guys get sent to the prison, but if you're sending these young guys to prison on these charges, you've already ruined their life. So you've already cut off opportunities for them further down the line, because they're forever tarnished with this. And they've got a criminal conviction, they'll find it harder to find work and meaningful employment. And you send them to prison, and prisons are hotbeds of radicalization. where they're surrounded by other criminals, other insane nutters in the prison. So you're not really de-radicalizing them at all, are you? You're pushing them further into radicalization, further into extremism, and it's not. You see it in America. All the prison gangs are like Nazi prison gangs, you know, and they're all shaved head, violent thugs, stabbing people, selling drugs, all this awful stuff they do to their community, or other communities, even not just to their own. So I think there does need to be a policy change, and at the moment, the Homeland Party isn't in power and can't affect that. But what we can do is try and reach out to these kids on a non-judicial basis, and try and reform them, try and reintegrate them into society, give them hope for the future, show them that there are actually political solutions to the existential threat that our people face, and that you can be put.
Oh no! Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. I think the internet might have just dropped a little bit. I'm going to pause this recording a moment.
Help, and I want to do that. I don't want any young person falling into the danger that I fell down before being pulled out by Kenny.
Right, there we are. I think that might be where it is. So what happened there, James? I'm not sure if it come across on your end. I paused the recording slightly because I'm not sure what happened. The bandwidth might have just dropped temporarily, and the internet might have dropped a little bit. But I think I caught everything that you said as it was catching up, and you were mentioning that not only about the prison being not, when they send it to prison, they've not only ruined their lives, but it's going to radicalize them even more because of the environment that exists on the inside, and how it is important to present them. And Kenny is the chairman of Homeland, obviously is presenting, be like, no, we do have political solutions, and anybody that's saying that we don't is misguided in and of themselves, and is, in that way then tacitly admitting that, well, what other alternative do we have? As you mentioned before, where like, if you're saying that, well, you're basically saying that it's, I don't know, time to physically go to war, or whatever it is, and start doing all these horrible.
Yeah, well, that's sort of those sort of people that spread that message are creating a discourse where politically inexperienced young people they feel like they've got nobody to trust, and then they fall prey to this dangerous talk, and they end up engaging in dangerous ideas and dangerous action because of that. So I really hate that phrase, there is no political solution, because there is a political solution, and that solution is the Homeland Party. And even if, God forbid, something happens, there is no more Homeland Party, rest assured something else will crop up in its place. The ground is fertile for our policies, for our perspective. There has never been a more fertile time for our politics than there is now. And it's as things get worse and worse, support for these ideas will only get higher, because people won't be able to afford anymore to hold luxury beliefs that do not reflect reality. So they're going to have to come to the light, and they're going to have to come to the time where they say, right, there's time for a solution. And I did want to give a shout out to Kenny Smith and the Homeland Party. I'll put on my my Homeland Party hat for the rest of this call. I'm quite proud of this one.
There you are, Kenny. That's for you. Kenny, that's for you.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier on this. Now, there's pretty much sort of a lot of stuff that I wanted to talk to. So a lot of stuff involving around the main topic of conversation, which is going to be like what it's like to be in that scenario when you're in that really radicalized state, and going around doing all these kinds of things. And you sort of drew a parallel, and the way that it was panning out in my mind, it was almost very similar to what we see particularly in America, and even with like the far left organizations over here, which which is the pro-Palestine mob, the Antifa and stuff like that. Was it sort of similar to that? Not like the activities necessarily you were getting involved in, but you mentioned you were like masking up and going around, were there kind of similarities there? Yeah. And
yeah, I would say so. I remember one time I attended a a protest march in Edinburgh. Now, this was organised by the SDL, the Scottish Defence League. It was kind of like a Scottish offshoot branch of the English Defence League. So it was organised by them, and me and my old group turned up to that. I think that was, I can't remember what year that was, maybe 2018, maybe before that. I can't quite remember exactly when it was, but we marched on Holyrood because what had happened, it was a case in Dundee, actually, where a dental student had, I think he was a teenager himself, he was a pedophile, and he sexually abused a toddler. And you would expect a pedophile who sexually abused a toddler to be thrown away in the darkest dungeon and never let back out into society. But no, what happened is he was found guilty. No prison time, no fine, no community service, no going on a list. He was found guilty and given no punishment, no sentence. So this march, I know it's outrageous. So this march was organised by the SDL, and the point of the march was to demand mandatory prison time for convicted child abusers and paedophiles. That's what the march was about. So we turned up to that, and there was maybe 30, 40 people on the SDL kind of camp. And then 2 or 3 of us marched alongside them. And as we were marching, do you know how many counter-protesters there were to us demanding mandatory prison time for convicted paedophiles?
I dread to think. I'd probably say for...
I was about 400.
I was going to say, in today's climate,
Yeah,
I easily would have said
by
about
a factor of 10.
3 to 4 for every one of you. That's what I would have said at the very least.
Yeah, but, a factor of 10. About a factor of 10. Standing against us because we wanted that. But I do remember being there. You were saying about the similarities between far-right extremism and then the far-left extremism. Real nationalism isn't far-right or far-left, which is what we believe in as nationalism. But it gets called far-right, but then libertarians or conservatives will call it lefty because of some housing policy or economic policies that we'll have. What I noticed was a bit of a similarity because even then I was a bit self-reflective and I was looking across to the other side and I was seeing, just as we adopted symbols and badges and dressed a certain way to identify as a political organisation, like the skull masks, the boots, the bomber jackets, that sort of thing. I looked across and I saw the exact same thing on the other side amongst the youth. The boomers were just boomers, but like Green Party types. But the youth I noticed as well, they all had like brightly dyed hair. They were all dressed like punk rockers. And this was Antifa. This was like the Antifa, Antifa, right? And they dressed like utter shit. But they had a sort of political uniform as well, right? And we had our slogans. And they had their slogans. And our side was getting really worked up and shouting and swearing and everything like that. And I think I'm on camera flipping off a journalist that was there at the time. We've got a cracking photograph of me with my skull mask on, going like that. Hey, wouldn't do that now. Very uncouth, and I'm beyond it. But and the other side were doing the same thing, and they were shouting chants and shouting and swearing. And we have seen as well now. I mean, all throughout history, there's been left-wing terroristic violence, all throughout history, and political violence. It's called a Red Terror for a reason. It's not made up. McCarthy was right. And we saw it in Russia, we saw it all over Europe between the wars, cases in Britain, the weather underground in America, loads and loads of this. And even this like climate change apocryphalism. The climate change apocalypse is driving people nuts as well.
The pagan sun god. The pagan
there was a case in Britain where, and I might get some details wrong, but it was like an upper middle class, lower upper class, like gentry family, like with an aristocratic last name and a big house and lots of cars. Their daughter, who was older than I was when I was ever involved in anything, was it Just Stop Oil or some other climate change thing, and they broke into a British nuclear facility where I think, or it was like our armament facility or whatever it was. It was like where weapons and ammunition and munitions were stored, and they broke in, assaulted the guards, shocked that they weren't shot on the spot.
Yeah.
And they were doing that because they were protesting us sending weapons to, I think it was Israel, which I'll go out on a limb and say we shouldn't be supplying Israel with weapons. We shouldn't be supplying anybody with weapons when it's not in our interest. And but at the same time, I don't go breaking into like munitions factories. That's a good way to get yourself shot. And she's now in prison on terrorism charges. This young lassie who's like, again, went to university, had way more opportunities than I ever had, pushed herself for more opportunities. Her family comes from wealth. Like, she was going to be fine. She was going to be good. Fell into this extremism on the left. Nobody tried to stop her. Nobody tried to de-radicalize her from that and say, okay, tell you what, why don't you start volunteering for the Green Party and voting for them and doing all of this, if that's what you're about.
It's being pushed so hard in universities as well.
Well, that's it. It's because their rhetoric is acceptable, whereas ours wasn't. The rhetoric I fell into. And I think the far left thing's far more dangerous than anything I was ever involved in. There's more murders attributed to them, more property damage, more arson as well, more bombs. There's nothing on anything I was ever involved in that's anywhere close to what happened there. Like, I don't know anyone in my personal life that committed any acts of terror or political violence, right? The lefties do. They all know someone who's been, and the Just Stop Oil people all know people who've been gone to prison or arrested for terrorism. And I do think that needs to be addressed on the left. Now, I don't believe we can help in the Homeland Party. Maybe we can, because we do have a strong environmental policy that's up on the website. So maybe we can help with that. But we're not lunatics. Like, we're not going to stop the production of oil. So maybe we won't be able to reach out to them. Because in order to help these people, and this is why I think it's important the Homeland Party is there to help these young people, is that in order to help them, you first have to show them that you can relate to where they're coming from. And I don't know if these left-wing extremists can be related to by us in that way. Maybe I'm lacking in imagination, but something needs to exist on the left to help these people too. The Homeland Party here on the right, and we're starting to get the ball rolling and helping these people. We've had a lot of young people join the Homeland Party. Recently, there was, and you won't mind me saying this, but there's a lad up in Scotland called Robbie who joined the Homeland Party. I think he joined when he was either 16 or 18. I don't know where our membership cut-off date is. He joined at like the youngest.
Mentioned him in our interview. Fernie mentioned him.
Yeah, great lad, right? Fantastic young lad, yeah. And a really atrocious brass neck thing that happened was, I think it was Hope Not Hate or the Ferret, two despicable organisations, wrote and in their headline described Robbie as being groomed, by the Homeland Party. And that's the exact opposite of what we're doing. I wish when I was Robbie's age that the Homeland Party was there and that I could be educated in ways to help my community and pushed away from this dangerous ideology and these dangerous actions and criminal behaviour. Now, Robbie's come in. He's a great lad. I don't think he was ever at risk of anything like I was. He's a much more sensible young man than I was. But he's come in, and now he's doing real positive work for his local community. And he's getting involved, and he's on the ladder to get involved in serious legal political action, engaging in the political process, which is important for any democracy. And he's been described as being groomed by Kenny. And the absolute cheek of that, because we will take on young men like that and provide them purpose and provide them with a positive life track. And what Hope Not Hate will do is they will click their fingers together like this in glee when they see young men like that and go, how can we ruin their lives? They're not out there to help you. They want you to be another statistic that they can point to as a boogeyman. So for all the young people listening, don't fall for the Hollywood neo-Nazi crap. Don't become the man that they're painting you to be. Be better than you ever thought you could be. and get involved with the Homeland Party, or start volunteering in your community if you don't want to do that, or if you're not old enough yet to join up. I guarantee you there will be positions available for you to volunteer. Charity shops are always seeking somebody to come in and help.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was something that really ticked me off, was them describing that, because really we're there to help people like Robbie, and as Kenny helped people like a young man like myself.
Mm-hmm.
And Hope Not Hate and the Ferret are there to take advantage of you. They're there to ruin your life. Like I said, I've been doxxed so many times. I'm proudly face out. I've no shame about my beliefs, my politics, or what I do for my community. I'm very proud, actually. And that's something that's being stripped away from young people, is the ability to be proud of yourself. I'm glad that I found that purpose in the Homeland Party.
There we are. And to be fair, it's pretty much it, like everything I wanted to go through. That seems like quite a nice place to leave it as well, to be fair. Just because we got about 3.5 minutes before this recording will automatically go off anyway, before the meeting will close. Do you want to give people a little bit of insight into sort of where they can find you, or where they can sort of follow your activities and stuff like that if they wanted to, if you're happy to, obviously. And then a little bit about what's coming up for yourself and obviously for the Homeland Party in the future. I'm aware you've got a big remigration conference on the 26th. I'm aware of that. And is there anything in particular otherwise that's going on for the sort of going into the second quarter of this year?
Oh, we're always busy. We've always got far too much to do and not enough hands to do it. We really do punch above our weight in the Homeland Party. So we're always up to something. We've got the big remigration conference coming up later this year. We're going to have a national camp that we hold every year. And it's sort of like Scout Camp, if you remember back to those days, if you're on the Scouts. It's the event of the year for me. I absolutely love it. I love the outdoors anyway. I love camping. And seeing all your friends is just brilliant. You'll never make a friend like you make in the Homeland Party. So we've got that coming up later in the year. We'll have other conferences, I'm sure, coming up. We will be contesting council seats, or community council seats, parish council seats, I believe. That's not really my forte. I'm a lowly activist. But we are doing that this year as well. So there's loads of stuff to get your hands on and doing the Homeland Party. If you want to find out more about the Homeland Party, you can find them on Twitter. I'm sure that George will be able to put the link in there. You can follow myself on Twitter if you're interested. I talk about this quite often, about the topics we spoke about tonight. I'll probably be releasing more videos or articles on this then going into a further deep dive than I can do sort of doing it live. And I'm sure George can put my Twitter hat. I've not got it to hand. Thank you very much, George.
It'll all be in the show notes as well, guys. And if you want down below.
Thanks very much. And if you want to join the Homeland Party, I'm sure we can twist George's arm into putting that link as well. It's only £36 for the year. That's your membership for the year. Yeah. And George, you're free to join as well if you're interested. You'd be more than welcome aboard. You've been so kind to me and kind to Josh. And I really appreciate you having me on to talk about this important issue.
Yeah, it's a problem. I think it's
thank
very,
you.
very
You've
important.
done a service to the country.
I was just saying to her, thank you very much. I appreciate what you're saying. I appreciate that. But I was saying to Josh, very similar thing I said to Josh. It's like the people are so eager to stifle speech, stifle conversation. Even just with me, I want to know more about what actually doing. As you said, you dropped a couple of names: Hope Not Hate, Ferret, all of these other organizations, BBC. They want to push the narrative, and there's always two sides to every story, and ultimately the second side got to get told as well, and that's how everybody benefits. That's how the listener benefits. I'm not sure when this meeting is going to cut off, James, so we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it. It's been an amazing conversation, and yeah, you can find all the stuff down below, guys. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it useful, and we'll catch up with you very, very soon.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. My conversation with Mr. James Munro. Hope you enjoyed it. There's a lot of troubling topics in there, so I appreciate that might not be the best word, but I hope you found it useful. Hope you found it informative. One question for you. So one of the things that James said is that I believe his exact quote was, everyone knows if you look at America that they're the cranks, right? So we brought up the story, or rather James brought up the story, I didn't know about it, of Rhiannon Rudd, for example. I want to ask you, do you think that we have an actual far-right problem in the UK in the same way that there are, that term is bandied about all the time, right? Do we have an actual far-right problem in the UK? Or again, is it just another tool to gaslight people and all things like that? Please do let me know. Let me know your thoughts. Appreciate it as always. And looking forward to catching up with you with the next one. Hopefully we should have another really interesting guest coming on in the very near future. And I'll keep you posted on that as it comes out. Thank you guys. This has been Voice of the Valleys. I will see you next time. Godspeed.